She thought speaking the truth would set her free. Instead, it sparked a digital storm that nearly erased her. What began as a moment of betrayal behind closed doors quickly spiraled into public outrage, online backlash, and a battle to reclaim her voice. This is the untold story of how exposing a cheater cost her everything, but taught her even more. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you. Ariyah had never considered herself an investigator. She wasn't one for snooping or prying into the private corners of people's lives. But something about Jordan's behavior had shifted. Suddenly at first, like a painting tilted just enough to feel off. Late replies, excuses that didn't align, and the soft click of a locked phone screen when she entered the room. She chalked it up to work stress until it became impossible to ignore. It wasn't just instinct. It was evidence. The restaurant receipt from a city he claimed he hadn't visited. A lipstick shade she'd never worn found in the passenger side of his car. And finally, the photo. A blurry image sent to her by someone anonymous. A shot of Jordan, hand in hand with a woman Ariyah had never seen before. Not affectionate like siblings, not friendly like colleagues. This was intimate, unmistakable. Betrayal came in layers. First the shock, then the confusion, then the rage. Ariyah's world didn't just shift, it fractured. She had defended Jordan countless times, believed in his vision, supported his career moves, and moved across cities for him. She had become part of his brand, part of the polished image he paraded online, a perfect couple, an aspirational life. But behind that digital curtain was deception, and she refused to keep the secret. Boasting about it wasn't her first choice. She tried calling him, messaging, giving him space to explain himself, but he vanished into silence. So, one night, driven by a mix of clarity and fury, she opened her camera and told the truth. Calmly, clearly, she laid out the timeline, the facts, the proof. No names, no threats, just her story, unfiltered and raw. The video went viral within hours. Some applauded her bravery, others called it petty, but the views climbed, and soon, so did the reposts. People began speculating, connecting dots, identifying Jordan without Ariyah ever having to name him. The internet was good at playing detective when there was a scandal to consume. At first, Ariyah felt vindicated, seen. Her pain wasn't hidden in whispered conversations anymore. It had a spotlight, and the world seemed to agree with her. She had exposed a cheater. She had spoken up. She had taken back control. But the tide turned quickly. The comments began to shift. Strangers questioned her motives. Some called it a clout grab. Others accused her of ruining a man's reputation over relationship drama. Influencers picked up the story, twisting her narrative for entertainment. One podcast host mocked her voice. Another labeled her emotionally unstable. Then came the threats. Harsh messages, warnings to delete her posts, claims that she was jealous or vindictive. Somehow, Jordan's silence had made him look dignified, while Ariyah became a symbol of bitterness. Screenshots of her past tweets resurfaced, random, old jokes taken out of context and painted as problematic. An online mob formed, not against the man who betrayed her, but against the woman who dared to speak. Ariyah's inbox flooded. Her business lost clients. People who once praised her brand began to distance themselves. She had gone from betrayed girlfriend to internet villain in less than a week. The cancellation wasn't formal. It was ambient, creeping into her daily life like smoke under a locked door. She hadn't lied, she hadn't exaggerated, but the narrative had slipped from her hands, warped by the speed and cruelty of online discourse. Betrayal, it seemed, didn't stop with Jordan. The public, who had once rallied behind her, turned just as quickly. The same platforms that offered her a voice became weapons turned against her. And in the echo chamber of hashtags and hot takes, the truth no longer mattered, only the noise did. Ariyah had exposed a cheater. Now, the internet was coming for her. In the days that followed, Ariyah's name stopped trending, but the damage lingered like ash after a fire. She watched the chaos she'd never intended unfold in slow motion, helpless as her life splintered across screens she couldn't control. The truth had a short shelf life, outrage longer. And in the court of public opinion, she had been tried and convicted, without defense, without mercy. Her business inquiries dried up first. Clients who once praised her creativity began to ghost her emails. Collaborations fell through quietly. One brand pulled their scheduled campaign, citing a sudden shift in direction. Ariyah knew better. It wasn't about the art. It was about the optics. No one wanted to be associated with controversy, even if the controversy was rooted in a truth she never asked for. She stopped posting. Not because she had anything to hide, but because every word became ammunition. A simple update turned into speculation. A photo of her smiling became a magnet for comments questioning her sincerity. Some said she was playing the victim. Others claimed she'd got what she deserved. The cruelty came from faceless accounts, strangers who knew nothing about her life but felt entitled to judge it. Even her personal relationships took a hit. Some friends checked in with her quietly, behind closed doors, afraid to be seen taking sides. Others disappeared altogether, unwilling to be caught in the crossfire of digital backlash. Isolation crept in where support used to be. It wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. It was about survival in the vacuum that followed. And Jordan? He stayed quiet. His silence became strategy. Without a word, he painted himself as mature, composed, and above the drama. His followers, mostly unaware or willfully blind, continued to support him. Some even celebrated his grace under fire. He leveraged the scandal subtly to rebrand himself. A few well-placed stories, some cryptic posts about growth and forgiveness, and suddenly he was the victim of a malicious attack. He hadn't lost anything. Not business, not followers, not status. If anything, the exposure had made him more popular. People love redemption arcs, and Jordan had cast himself perfectly. Meanwhile, Ariyah sat in the rubble of her own honesty. She replayed the events in her head constantly, wondered if there was a better way, a quieter way. But the truth was, silence had already failed her. When she reached out to Jordan before posting, he disappeared. When she tried to process privately, he left her hanging in emotional limbo. She didn't choose to go public out of vengeance, she did it to reclaim her narrative. But in the digital arena, intention means nothing. It's perception that rules. Ariyah tried to pivot. She created new content, focused on her design work again, but the views weren't the same. Engagement dropped. Her account, once filled with encouragement and celebration, now sat under a layer of suspicion. People didn't forget scandals, even when the facts faded. And for a Black woman in the spotlight, the bar for redemption was always higher. Forgiveness was rarely extended as freely. She considered quitting, shutting everything down and starting fresh under another name. But something held her back. Not pride, but principle. She had told the truth, and even if the world had punished her for it, she refused to become invisible. Not again. So, she stayed, quietly, steadily, rebuilding her business, relearning how to share without losing herself, blocking out the noise, filtering out the hate. Not because the betrayal didn't matter anymore, but because it couldn't define her forever. The drama had left scars, no doubt, but Ariyah knew that scars weren't just reminders of pain. They were evidence of healing. She exposed the cheater. The world tried to cancel her, but she wasn't finished yet. Months passed. The noise died down, as it always does. The internet moved on to fresher scandals, newer faces to dissect and discard. But Ariyah remained, not as a trending topic, not as a viral cautionary tale, but as a woman rebuilding herself, brick by brick, in the shadow of public judgment. She no longer expected applause. What she sought now was balance. Quiet mornings where her name wasn't trending, steady clients who respected her craft more than her follower count, Simple affirmations that she still had value outside of the storm she'd survived. And slowly, that balance began to return. Her online presence shifted. The selfies turned reflective. The captions became deeper, not dramatic, but deliberate. She no longer posted for validation. She posted to reclaim her space, to remind herself and others watching in silence that you could come back from being broken, that you could speak your truth, be torn down for it, and still stand. Support trickled back in, differently this time, not from the loud voices that demanded drama, but from those who had been quietly watching, absorbing, relating. Women who had been betrayed, then blamed. Creators who had spoken out and lost everything. People who had been canceled not for lying, but for being too honest in a world that preferred illusion. Ariyah's inbox became a place of quiet testimonies. Messages from strangers saying, "You helped me walk away," or "Your story was mine." Those voices, unheard before, now lifted her in ways likes and shares never could. She never got an apology, not from Jordan, not from the platforms that let her be torn apart, not from the brands that dropped her when things got messy. But she didn't need it anymore. Closure didn't always come wrapped in regret. Sometimes it came in the form of peace. Jordan continued his rebrand. He became more careful, more curated. His new partner, the same woman from the photo, now appeared in his posts, subtle but present. Ariyah didn't follow him. She didn't need to. His story was no longer hers to carry. She started speaking publicly, on her terms. Podcasts invited her on, expecting scandal, but got something else instead. Clarity, wisdom, resilience. She spoke about the consequences of honesty, about how truth, when spoken by a woman, especially a Black woman, was too often labeled aggression. How society loved transparency until it made them uncomfortable. Her words landed differently now, not as gossip, but as survival. She wasn't trying to erase the past. She was contextualizing it, turning it into something more useful than pain. Ariyah launched a platform, not for revenge, but for recovery. A safe space for people who had been betrayed, publicly or privately. A place for people to share without fear of being discredited. Her followers grew again, but this time they weren't just curious. They were committed. They came not for the mess, but for the meaning behind it. She had been a girlfriend, a scapegoat, a spectacle. Now she was something more, a storyteller with control of her own narrative. The betrayal hadn't defined her, but it had refined her, forced her to confront not just the deceit of a partner, but the fickleness of fame, the fragility of perception, the cost of vulnerability. She once thought the worst part was the cheating. Then she thought it was the cancellation. But now she knew the hardest part was rediscovering herself beneath the wreckage. And she had done it. Ariyah had exposed a cheater. The internet tried to cancel her, but in the end, she told the truth and rebuilt a life that no one could take away. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.